All right, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this edition of our occasional series of executive conversations. We'll be recording today's session, so for those viewing us live, be sure to submit any questions that come up during the course of our program and that I can share with our guest using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And I'll try to work those in as time allows. Our featured guest today is Tom Finegan. He's a serial entrepreneur who made his career creating and managing successful businesses across a range of industries. He's the founder, CEO, and chairman of Clarkston Consulting and has led the firm through decades of change and disruption. Under his leadership, the firm has maintained steady growth while achieving an industry-leading client satisfaction rating of 97% over the last 20 years and a net promoter score of 87%. Tom is also a founder or early investor in other North Carolina businesses, including Food Logic, Bull City Talent Group, Momentum, and others. Tom, thanks for sitting down with us today to share your perspectives on leadership and to talk about your new book, Amplifiers. We're glad to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you, Brooks. Good morning.
Good morning. So I'll kick things off with a general bio question. I sort of hit some bullets there for everyone's level set, but tell us a bit about you. Where are you from? What did you study? What were your career plans, and how did your career vary from that, if at all? And what led you to North Carolina?
Yeah, thanks. So I grew up in New York, on Long Island, just outside the city, and found my way to school in Baltimore. I went to Johns Hopkins and enjoyed it there quite a bit. And when I was there at school, had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I figured, well, I'll join a consulting firm. Joined, at the time, it was Arthur Andersen, became Andersen Consulting, which is now Accenture. And so I joined their Washington, D.C. office while still living in Baltimore. And then a few years after that, I started Clarkston Potomac Group.
Well, you've been a busy guy with doing all of that. Tell us a little bit about what led you to founding that group. You had, this is 30 years ago or so. What problem were you hoping to solve? What were you trying to achieve?
So there were a group of us at Andersen, and we felt like they cared more about themselves than they did about their clients or their people. And we felt like if we created a company that genuinely cared about our clients and genuinely cared about our team members, we call them stewards, that the financial results will follow. So let's create a great business, and then hopefully that will then drive the bottom line performance. And it's a simple formula, but it's worked for us for 30 years.
So that's a philosophy-driven approach to the kind of business you wanted to run. Talk about the early days of how you attracted your coworkers and built the business with that sort of culture.
Yeah, so we were also fortunate enough to work with a piece of technology that no one had heard of at the time, called SAP, and people didn't even know how to spell it, and we had that expertise. And so that was a pretty small community. So we were able to network. It was before the internet. You could not recruit on the internet. It was all really word of mouth and networking. And so we had a strong network, and we were able to attract some early employees and hire some people and teach them, and kind of grew from there.
Great. Well, you've spent a lot of time working with some of the leading companies in the country, particularly with their IT organizations. What would you say are the biggest issues facing technology leaders right now?
So it's a great question. I think the single biggest issue today is access, attracting, retaining, and developing talent. Mm-hmm. We are in such a knowledge worker talent squeeze, and companies are really struggling to find good talent, and if they do have it, they're struggling to retain it. The wage inflation for IT professionals is definitely growing. It's good if you've got the skill, but it's much more difficult if you're an employer. The balance of power shifts over time. Sometimes employers have more power when there's higher unemployment. Sometimes the job seekers have more power when there are more jobs to fill than qualified people to fill them. But right now there's a lot of work, there's a lot of pent up demand, and a lot of disruption in the market. And IT executives and companies are really struggling to attract and retain good talent.
On the issue of retention of talent, we as an association deal a lot with the talent topic because it has long been a major issue for hirers and employers. Although there's a lot in the news these days about how hard it is to attract and retain workers at the retail level, hospitality, those sorts of jobs, which we all feel when we try to go somewhere and you see the service or the lack of ability to even go inside a McDonald's anymore. On the other end of the highly skilled workforce, we're seeing some of the same challenges. The Great Resignation is a term you hear bandied about. A professor at, I think, A&M, Texas A&M coined it. But people who are more seasoned, more senior, are taking the opportunity to step back, make a change, what have you. And so you touched on the attraction and retention of top talent, particularly in highly skilled environments. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about that. What are leaders doing to retain their top talent, their higher end talent, not just the ones who are coming in new and want to have a place where they can grow?
Yeah, I think the single biggest thing that leaders can do to retain talent, and let's just take compensation and benefits aside, because that always plays a factor. And for decades, that's been, people want to make sure they're getting paid fairly or just a tiny bit above fairly. So let's just take that to the side. But it's about, people are more interested now in the company's mission and purpose, what they're trying to achieve, the quality of the work environment, how they treat, how people treat each other, how they treat their customers or clients, that sort of thing. So there are a lot more intangibles at play now, more so than just the work that they're doing. The other thing, they want to be challenged. They want to know that their work is making a difference, not just for the company, but for society. And so, companies that feed into that story are in a much better position to retain some of this talent. I think the other thing too is for senior employees, they enter a period of their life where they want to give it away. They've learned a lot over the years, and now they want to hand over the torch. So I think some of the best talent actually looks to develop more junior talent when they're in roles that can be developmental, and they can be more mentors to junior talent. I think that is an attractive element of the job.
Well, that may be a good segue then into talking a little bit about your book and what led to you writing it and what it has to say. The title is, there's a short title, Amplifiers, but the long version is Amplifiers: How Great Leaders Magnify the Power of Teams, Increase the Impact of Organizations, and Turn Up the Volume on Positive Change. So what led you to write the book?
Yes, thank you for the question. It was definitely an adventure. For those who have known me over the years, one of my objectives has been to write a book. And I've just never had the time to really get it done. And then, of course, never let a good pandemic go to waste. So during the pandemic, I wasn't on an airplane as much. And so I had a little more time to put my ideas down on paper. And really, when I say my ideas, they're the ideas of the firm and the team. And I had the honor to synthesize a lot of great input from some of my colleagues. But what we found We're students of companies of performance. We look to see why do some companies have outsized performance and other companies just struggle to get there. Their projects are delayed, or they can't seem to get can't seem to get them started. There are issues in buy-in and what have you. So as we started studying the patterns of great companies and patterns of marginal or struggling companies, one of the things that we noticed was there is this special breed of employee that exist kind of under the surface. So they're not the most highly visible employee, but they're the go-to people. They're the kind of employee that just get it done. And then as we peeled more into that, we noticed that they blended both great leadership characteristics and great followership characteristics. And so as we started looking and analyzing and did a little more research onto that, we found that they're this blend of leader-follower, and that at the intersection of great leadership and great followership is what we call an amplifier. And that's where the real work gets done for great companies.
It's a great term. So you're talking about those people, but tell us who you hope benefits from the book. Is it people across the board? Is it mainly for leaders to understand that better? How would you describe that?
Yeah, so I think it's a good self-actualization for leaders or followers, frankly. If the leaders in the room look at the book, they can say, how can I develop and nurture better followership within my organization so I can then improve and amplify the power of the outcomes that teams that I oversee can deliver back to the organization or to our customers or consumers or patients. So from a leadership point of view, they can develop a stronger base of followers. And when we think about a leader and followers, it's generally one to many. So there is a leader and many followers. And if we can get the many followers to produce more work or outcomes, then the organization will advance at a faster pace, at a faster clip. For the employees looking to develop their careers, we've been taught throughout our lifetime that you need to be a leader, you need to be a leader. And that's true in part, but leadership without followership, it caps the growth potential of those leaders. Most of the best leaders that we encounter cut their teeth in followership. So if we think about, some of our clients, a Dan Calkins, who's the president and CEO of Benjamin Moore Paints, he was hired in as a sales correspondent, a job that doesn't even exist today because it's got, technology has rendered that job obsolete. But he grew up through the ranks, and some of his stories are amazing in how he was able to step in where he had an absentee boss. He was able to step in, make the decisions, report back, and advance his sales territory out west, even though he was 3,000 miles away from his boss in the home office. All before the internet and connectivity and Zoom networking events were even a thing. So it's that development and studying that development, blending it with the leadership is I think a strong development path for emerging leaders.
Well, on that note, you've talked about leadership and followership. Other terms that people use are management and subordinates. All kinds of terms play into that. But you really distinguish between leadership and management, as well as followership versus being a subordinate. Delve a little more into that and the definitions as you see them.
Yeah, people think just because you hold the top spot in an organization, you must be a leader. And we disagree with that pretty strongly. Leadership and management are very different. There's a great book put out years ago, A Force for Change. Linda Hill wrote that book, and it's where I really learned that. concept early in my career, but just because you're in the top spot doesn't make you a leader. We can look at dictators around the world. Are they leaders or just people they manage through an iron fist or fear? If you don't comply with my order, I will execute you. That's not really leadership, or people that are out front and we think they're a leader, but actually they'll throw you under the bus at the next moment. They take credit for your success and blame you for a failure, right? Like, that's not leadership. They may occupy the top spot or a management role within a company, but their leadership is lacking. People follow them or will comply with their directives because they have the position of power, and it's transitory. It's not sustainable leadership. And so we juxtapose leadership and that executive position. An old client of mine who was at Dow AgriSciences, which is a division of Dow, who's the CEO of that the ag crop protection business of Dow Chemical, left after the joint venture with DuPont and took on the job as the CEO of Lindsay. And I would chat with him and he said, Tom, I really need to check myself to say, we assembled the senior leadership team at the companies, the new CEO, and they didn't really know him or his style. And they said, I got to really check myself to say, are they listening to me because I'm the new boss in town? Or are they following me because I'm a leader and they're inspired by the new direction I'm trying to take the company? And he said, I really have to check myself on that. And good leaders who are self-actualized will ask that question, and they'll start to engage sort of their key followers, their consigliaries, if you will, like the mafia uses the consigliere. That's the person who has the guts and is empowered to tell the leader or the emperor they have no clothes. So let's, every good leader has one or two or a small team of people who have the courage to let them know where they're off base.
Well, we've talked already about talent, the demand for talent, and it's just accelerating in this environment. Let's think about tech companies for a moment, or tech organizations within companies, which are sort of where we play the most. Many of the hiring managers are focused on filling immediate need, hiring quickly, building scale capacity to deliver what they are expected to deliver. So how would you advise a tech company or a tech company leader to think about leadership training and identifying amplifiers in parallel to filling slots fast and trying to get people in roles so they can deliver what their services are?
Yes, that's a great question. So tech in particular has a number of challenges with respect to talent. So, first of all, everyone has probably more tech debt or more development than they need to get done immediately than they've got the time or team to do it. So they want to get people on board that already know the skill and can be productive on day one. That's great, except for a couple of things. You have to pay up for that. You have to make sure that they end up being a good cultural fit, et cetera. So that's one thing of the immediate, the tyranny of the immediate versus the long play. And there's some strategies on the long play in tech development. Companies like Momentum Learning, for example, has their code school, and they partner with companies to develop talent, junior talent, and transform talent from other business functions within the company in order to supply some of that tech talent. So that's one challenge, is the tyranny of the immediate versus the long play. And I believe the best companies, the great companies, do both. They need to resolve the immediate, but they also need to develop net new talent and bring net new talent into their company and into the marketplace. The other challenge that tech companies have is they may be good, developers, but good developers doesn't make a good manager of developers. And so there's a whole element of professional development that needs to get put into place in order to make their top tech development talent into, high performing team and the managers of those high performing teams. So that's a whole nother issue there. And then with respect to developing, better followers in the followership, there's a lot there that companies haven't built the infrastructure. They may have leadership development programs, but they don't understand some of the dimensions that make good followers. So are they courageous? Are they willing to push back, speak truth to power? Some of those things create are good traits for developing good followership. And then, you need to weigh those and develop those into your employee, sort of your development programs and performance ratings and that sort of thing. So it's a lot.
Sorry?
I said there's a lot packed into developing.
Certainly. You mentioned earlier, you referred to the followers as being sort of under the surface, but they're the get it done kind of people. So one of the questions that's come from our audience is, how can you find exemplary followers in your organization, particularly if it's a larger organization and it may not be so readily apparent?
Yeah, there's that old quote in Alice in Wonderland. It's, how will you, the Mad Hatter or whatever asks, how will you know if you're there if you don't know where you're going?
Right.
The first order of business is to identify the followership traits that are important to your organization. And so in the book, I list out leadership motives, because I think leadership motives are critical. Why does a leader lead? What are their underlying motives? What's their style? There's a lot that's been published on leadership styles, and then leadership traits. And there's a good body of work there, and a lot of leadership development programs and what have you have spent a lot of time in that dimension. And then what I've done is I've applied it to followership dimension. So followership motives. What motivates a good follower to be a good follower? What are their styles? What's a good followership style? And then what are the traits associated with that? And once you understand those, and in the book, I outline a bunch of them. They may or may not be applicable to your organization, but at least it's a starting point. We've got kind of a workshop format that can then break it down to help a company synthesize that. Then you decide, you outline what does, for this trait, what is it when demonstrated at a low level, at a medium, or at plan level, and then a high level. And then you can start to get those behaviors modeled so that you can then track it. And then once you can track it, then you can put programs in place to further develop them. And then you can assess that and carry that forward.
Well, flipping to now talking about leaders in organizations, we've had a question posed by our audience about transparency, leaders being transparent, and how to balance the importance of being transparent with occasionally the need to make decisions and plan and so forth about the future in a way that may not be as widely open as everybody might like. How does a leader balance that?
Well, I think the element of transparency, the leaders need to be truthful. And it's a little bit like being a parent. We don't tell our children everything. Leaders, it's like that too. And there's context. And the difference between being transparent and truthful, but the leaders, when you're at the tip of the spear, you've got the context of an awful lot of stakeholders, constituents. There's a lot of information that's not readily available to an employee or a customer or what have you. So the leaders have the benefit of the context, and then they need to communicate in the context of the situation. And that may or may not require more or less disclosure because they may have a fact or a set of facts that are just not available, that are proprietary or not available to the broader population group. It's definitely a balancing act. But at the end of the day, that's a judgment call that leaders make. And if their motives are right, and the trust is there, we outline the trust equation, which is credibility plus reliability plus intimacy over self-interest, is the trust equation. If their self-interest is high and their motives are wrong, then they will not have followers for long, right? They're probably more of a titled executive and a boss, not necessarily a leader. But if their motives are right and they're genuinely interested in the broader purpose or the mission of the company, then employees do need to trust a bit that they're providing the information as they see fit at the right time. But it's a bit of a balancing act.
Well, there's a topic that every person, leaders in particular, are focused on these days. We as an association, in fact, have done quite a bit of programming around this and really ramped up our programming around this, and that is diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly in tech, which is notoriously not particularly diverse, unfortunately. There's a lot of reasons why that may be and challenges to overcome, but nonetheless, a great effort underway to address it. So a common theme in your book is the need to focus on diversity and inclusion in organizations. So what thoughts do you have about why we continue to face a lack of inclusion, not just in tech, but in general, and how we might make some real headway in overcoming that problem?
So I think there are a couple of key things that leaders can do to change that. It's one of the biggest issues out there, and it requires action. The leaders need to take definitive steps towards changing that outcome. Issuing a press release saying you're interested in doing it, or starting an internal committee but not funding it with actual budget dollars, is insufficient to drive real change. So that's number one. There needs to be a stated objective and then action and resources put behind it. The second thing is, and I think this might be more important, is that we need to create a space where junior talent can start to develop the skills in the first place. And when we just want experienced people and they're not of gender diversity or ethnic diversity, and we just want experienced talent and that talent doesn't exist, well, some companies have to step up and commit to creating the talent. We need net new talent that looks different than yesterday's talent. And so companies that get it are putting in place real programs to develop the new talent. And they are committing then to onboard junior tech talent. And that junior tech talent will be the role models for new entrants to enter the workplace tomorrow. But we as leaders need to create that space so that we can onboard this net new talent.
Most people work for small organizations. The vast majority of employers in the country are small. There's only so many really large companies. And so when you have a startup situation or just a small organization that may not have a lot of layers, may not have departments that can develop these sorts of programs you're referring to and so on, what is your advice to small organizations? Someone in our audience specifically mentioned startups, but I would broaden that a bit to the 80 to 90% of businesses that are quite small.
So for the smaller company, there's always creative room to create this. It may be a partnership or sharing some responsibilities. But if the company wants to stay small forever, and you can be small in numbers but large in impact, and the companies that want to be large in impact need to have sort of new methods towards their ability to create change. And it's never easy. So small companies and startups, we have to work a lot. If you're a startup entrepreneur, you work a lot. It's just what you do. And if you have aspirations for outsized returns, and you want to make a difference in society, then you need to have the commitment to put some of these things in place. And if it is, and frankly, if we help somebody transform their career and create net new talent, they're going to be a loyal employee for a long time. And as a startup entrepreneur, that's really what we want. And it's a little bit of pay me now or pay me later. I'm either going to fight to pay up for new talent, or I'm going to commit to developing some talent, maybe a little more painful in the short run, but down the road, that's the loyal and engaged and committed type of employee that really propels our organizations forward down the road. So it is ultimately a win for us, a little more painful up front, and it's definitely a win for the new employee that we've developed these new skills with. Again, they probably have to commit a little more in their own learning and growth and development in the short run as well.
One of the challenges in D&I, as we've offered our own programming and talked to a lot of people who bring really interesting perspectives to that discussion, is that historically we have relied on things that are visibly obvious when we define diversity, whether it's gender or racial background, that sort of thing. But there's a lot of other areas that people bring to the table. And recently we've been featuring some really interesting work around neurodiversity, people who are on the autism spectrum, for example. That's very interesting to the tech community, the tech sector. There are people who bring different philosophical or political views to the table. There are people who may bring certain non-visible disabilities to the table, and yet looking at a picture, you would never know that. Seeing them on a stage, you would never know that. So how do we broaden people's mindset about what diversity encompasses and not have it be limited to the things that we can see?
And I think that's a great question, and it's enabled by technology. So, 20 years ago, we just didn't have the tools to parse people that could do a particular thing. But within neurodiversity, people on the autism scale can be great QA testers, or they could be great coders, but we didn't have the research or the ability to parse different pieces of jobs or job functions in order to optimize a particular skill and a particular job or outcome that a company needs. And we are learning and growing along those lines. I think there's an awful lot more work that can and should be done there. But we're starting to see different organizations crop up that are pairing people with particular skills with job functions that are needed in order to get that done, to get those jobs done. So it's a win-win.
Right. I mentioned in my intro of you that your company has a very high customer satisfaction rating and has for its history. You have a high net promoter score. So you must read all that feedback voraciously when it comes. What do you hear? What do your customers say about your organization that are sort of consistent themes that validate what you've been sharing with us?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I remember pitching one year, it was 100%. Every single client we had was satisfied. And I remember pitching it in front of a big deal that we were on. I was on the sales call. I was out there and 100% satisfaction. And they didn't believe me. It's like, it's unbelievable. It's not happening. But I'm like, you can call anyone you want. Anyway. Yes, I read it a lot. But I think the key is that it's not that we don't make mistakes. We make mistakes, but we own them. And when we do, we sit down, I fly out, or my partner is the president of the consulting business. We'll go meet with our client and we'll say, we've made a mistake here. Here's how we think we're going to make it right. And let's do that together. And when we take that approach, our clients are they're overjoyed with us, even though we just made a mistake on their project. They love the fact that we own up to it and we'll make it right. And that's just part of what we've done over the years in doing the right thing and genuinely caring about our clients. We care about the outcomes our teams are trying to develop, in their transformation efforts. It's not enough for us to get a task done on time, on budget. We need to delight our clients. We give them brilliant client service. We're really trying to see through to, are we delivering on their business benefits and that sort of thing. So we do spend a lot of time with that. We give awards to our project teams who have the highest client satisfaction or deliver the greatest business impact, their most innovative project or entrepreneurial. So we invest quite a bit in that. And it's part of our culture. Our cultures know that we're going to stand behind them when they're delivering their services to our clients. So it enables them to give their best and to know that they can push our clients to be even better. And they know that we'll all be there together to support them.
Great. Delighting clients. I like that. Well, sort of a final wrap-up question for you related to the book, and that is that you dedicated it to Bobby Minges, and the proceeds from the book go to support the I'm Not Done Yet Foundation. Tell us a bit about Bobby and about the foundation and what it's trying to accomplish.
Yeah, thank you for that. So Bobby is my nephew, my sister's daughter. He was diagnosed early on in his life with childhood cancer, neuroblastoma. If caught, within the first 24 months or 18 or 24 months, it's very treatable. They caught his when he was about 5 or 6. So it was difficult. It recurred when he was about 9 or so. And then throughout his teenage years, he was committed to having blood drives. He could not volunteer at the hospital because he wasn't 14 years old, and what he identified was a gap between when he was a child in pediatric cancer treatment. They had a lot of programs for pediatric treatment. And then as adults, there's an awful lot for adults in oncology and treatment. But that teenage years, there's a huge gap. And it's everything from, chemo destroys your fertility, whether you're male or female, and it's not covered by insurance. So there's just a lot of things that are at play that go through the minds, kids, adolescents' mental health, as well as their physical health, as well as their treatment. Kids want to be kids. Teenagers want to be teenagers. And so he identified this gap, and then through, Duke Cancer Institute, their adolescent and young adult cancer programs up in Philadelphia, New York, Winthrop, NYU, the Cleveland Clinic, and some other places. There's sort of a network of organizations now that focus on adolescent and young adult cancer patients and their families and survivors. So proceeds go to that. He passed away at 19. A couple of years ago, he was a junior at Duke and did not make it through. So anyway, it's his legacy lives on. I'm not done yet. And that's where the proceeds go. So thank you for asking about that.
That's a wonderful a wonderful way to keep the legacy going. So thank you for doing that.
And he was an amplifier. He amplified not just his life, but those around him. He had an infectious way of, hey, there's a problem. You guys don't know how to interact. I'm the cancer patient. So he would say to the doctor, don't talk to my mom and dad. I'm 18 years old. You tell me, talk to me. I'm the person. I'm the patient. I'm old, I'm of age to make my decision. So it's like a lot of things like that he just amplified and said, no, you be a doctor differently. You know the science, but you don't know how to deal with your patients. I'm the patient. It's just a fascinating way he amplified life.
That's a great story. Great story. Well, we're at the end of our time. It's a great way to end. And I want to thank you, Tom, for being our guest. We'll be sending all the registrants for today a link to this video, as well as a link to the book. Be sure to check out our website for upcoming events, especially as we build out our 2022 offerings. You can find us online at nctech.org. Thanks again for tuning in, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you.